4 or 5 years, somebody may do new research, and we may find out different information. There's two types of bipolar cells that transmit information. There's off-center bipolar cells and on-center bipolar cells. We're going to see on-center and off-center a lot. When we're talking about on-center or off-center, when we're talking about two different things, usually we're talking about when you look directly at something and you get light coming in, and when you close your eyes you still see an image. The off-center is usually the after image that we're talking about. So we have two different types of bipolar cells. The on-center bipolar cells are activated when light is turned on, and the off-center bipolar cells are activated when light is turned off. And that, of course, still gives you the off-center bipolar cells work better at night, and the on-center bipolar cells work better during the day. Okay, so now we still can see at night. Now we understand why cats and dogs and other animals that are wandering around at night and can see fairly well, now we understand why they see so well. Because of their off-center bipolar cells, we already know that their epithelial layer is more reflective. And since it's more reflective, it picks up whatever light there is out there. And so they can see in the dark.
What were you saying about animals when their eyes doesn't glare when you shine a light?
It means they probably have a strong sense of smell, and that's how they're functioning.
So their smell works better than their eyesight. Okay.
Right.
How about the dogs and cats that
blind?
They're blind then?
Yeah, if you shine a light in the dark at a dog, their eyeballs reflect back as almost white or yellow. If they're blind in one eye, then you'll see it'll be green.
Aren't they colorblind though, dogs?
Dogs are colorblind. You know, that's a good question. We have always thought that they were, but somebody did an experiment about 15 years ago, and he determined that they have some ability to determine light. It's not the same as ours, but it's better. or it's not as bad as we thought it was. Receptor cells release the neurotransmitter glutamate. Glutamate is decreased in off-center bipolar cells when light is weak or is turned off. Glutamate is decreased in on-center bipolar cells when light is turned on, and in the middle of the visual field. You remember glutamate is a inhibitor. Okay, so when the light is turned on, the on-center bipolar cells, the glutamate is decreased because it inhibits their ability to see. Okay. This gets really complicated.
Yeah.
Because, well, for one thing, we're working with 208 million pixels. So we're looking at 208 million different cones and rods. As confusing as all this is. Each cone is the fovea, and the fovea is connected to 4 types of bipolar cells. Okay. One on-center midget bipolar cell, one off-center midget bipolar cell, several on-center diffuse bipolar cells, and several off-center diffuse bipolar cells. Each midget bipolar cell connects to just one cone in the fovea. Each diffuse bipolar cell connects to several cones.
You say that in English?
Yeah, exactly. This has to do with your after image. Once again, this has to do with your after image. So your on-center and off-center midget bipolar cells, which are only connected to one cone, these are the cells that are activated when you're looking at something during the day and you're seeing a color. The other bipolar cells, the on-center diffuse bipolar cells and the off-center diffuse bipolar cells, these are activated when you close your eyes and you see an after image.
Is it like it's dark looking at your laptop and you look like somewhere else and you see
your laptop?
You see
you see your laptop, exactly. Exactly. This gets really, well, it's already been fairly confusing, but this is one of the reasons why we can still see in the dark, why we, and that's one of the reasons why when you were wearing your night vision goggles, why you had, now you have problems because you haven't activated this whole system. Your system is only daylight system. That's what you have been stimulating. That's what you have been exercising because you use the nighttime goggles. What you probably needed to do, and what the Army should have told you to do, was to walk around in the dark without the goggles when you weren't in a dangerous situation. Because what they did, they trained your eyes to only use your nighttime vision, or daytime vision.
What's the time we go at night? Because during the day we would sleep.
Right.
Because I mean that was our job to go.
At night. Yeah, I know. My brother, they'd do the same thing with him. They would have him sleep during the day and.
Yeah, we'd have a sign on our door. 6th Battalion Rangers. Sleep, be easy or whatever.
Yeah, he was the guy that could see the best at night, and that was the problem. That was his problem. He could see really well at night, but of course he didn't use night. He didn't use the night. We didn't. There were hardly any of those things over in Vietnam.
Yeah, they're probably barely coming out.
Yeah. So I mean, everybody was wandering around in the dark. Some people could see fairly well, and some people couldn't see at all. Because it all depends on how you've trained your eyes. My brother has tunnel vision, so he could see really, really good at night. There's something wrong with that kid. Other than that, when light is turned on center bipolar cells depolarize on-center ganglion cells. When light is turned off-center bipolar cells depolarize off-center ganglion cells. Now we're getting the after image. Stimulus only affects the part of the retina that is in the visual field. The retina will create a mosaic of stimulation that the brain puts together as a picture. So even during the day, if you look at a relatively bright light and then look away, you still see an after image of that bright light. So we're always getting after images. Sometimes we don't acknowledge the fact that we're getting after images. The reality is that you're getting an after image almost on a constant basis. All you have to do is either look away or close your eyes. Right now you're seeing this screen. If you close your eyes, you still see the screen, or you still see the white portion. The black portion, of course, isn't stimulating your eyes like the white portion is. But if you close your eyes, try it. Go ahead, try it. Do you see it?
Yeah.
You see the after image? Okay. So we're constantly getting an after image. So the reality is that our eyesight is affected by what we looked at before. So sometimes, and this is a problem with driving, some individuals have very sensitive eyes, so they have a very difficult time picking up what is now and what is before. Especially if you're driving down the road and you've got the sun glaring off of a bright metal. A lot of times that will blind you to the extent that even if you close your eyes or even look away, you still see the after image of the bright light. So it makes it difficult to function. Yes.
Question. What does LASIK do? What does it do to the eyes to where you don't need glasses?
That's an excellent question. It really all depends on what your problem is to begin with. Cataracts, LASIK, they use LASIK surgery.
There's a lot of guys in my unit that were getting it done.
Yeah, it has to do with myopia. It can potentially have to do with astigmatism. They're restructuring your eyes so that you have 20/20 vision or 20/10 vision. Usually it's 20/20 because LASIK surgery can only improve to a certain extent. So that's what they were doing. They were correcting whatever the problem is in their eyes. LASIK surgery, you can do that. It's, what is LASIK surgery? It's, my brain's not working today.
It's actually, did they burn something or?
Yeah. They're using, what are those damn things that?
I forgot to. My grandpa had it done on his eyes.
Like a infrared type thing or?
No, what is it? It's the thing that, the light that cuts things. What am I thinking of? Oh, geez, my brain's just not working today.
It's kind of like a laser.
Yeah, laser, that's what it is. It's laser surgery. LASIK surgery is laser surgery. And what they're doing is they're correcting whatever the problem is.
Yeah.
Which isn't that difficult to determine because an optometrist can diagnose what your problem is.
Yeah.
If I had LASIK surgery, would that work? My problem is presbyopia. I'm 70, you know, so my eyes are old. I'm not your grandfather, obviously. There's something wrong with that guy. Oh, wait a minute. He had LASIK surgery.
Mm-hmm.
And he can see perfectly without any glasses. He doesn't have presbyopia. That's what they did.
Yeah.
Yeah, they corrected his presbyopia. So
I think that's what it was. I didn't go to any of his appointments, but that he had like 3 appointments before, and then he had the surgery.
Right.
And then,
yeah, what they were doing with the 3 appointments before, they were making sure that this was his real problem.
Mm-hmm.
So, and of course, if you're tired today and you go in for an optometrist appointment, they're going to misdiagnose you because part of your problem is that you're tired.
Mm-hmm.
So your eyes aren't going to be the same. That's why they had 3 appointments with him to make sure that it was always the same problem.
Oh, okay.
So that when they corrected it, they didn't. Because there's one thing about LASIK surgery, you can't reverse it.
Once it's done, it's done. Huh?
Yeah, well, once it's done, it's done.
And if they screw up, well then you just have to get
Exactly, exactly. Well, not that bad. He'll be blind, I guess. Anyway.
Yeah, he had to wear those cool glasses for 24
No,
hours.
Yeah, those are so cool. I've always wanted a
I
pair.
just have one more question.
Yes.
Like me, when I look at something, I see spots. So what's going on?
Yeah, those are, we all have those. They're flaws in your aqueous humor. Floaters is what they call them. So you've got floaters. I've got floaters. Sometimes my floaters are all connected together and I'll see this like worm swimming across my vision or just moving across my vision.
Where is it from?
It's just flaws in your aqueous humor. You know, the fluid portion of your eyeball. It's just, you know, bubbles. It can be bubbles. It can be odd pieces of tissue or something.
Like mine, like right now, it looks like bursts.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, we all get those.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, that's good. That's good.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's good, and the reality is that usually when we see those, when we see the floaters, we just look beyond that. Our brain just fills in the information. And so we don't even detect the floaters. But we've got them in there all the time. Sometimes I'll look up and I will think that I have an eyelash that's down in my eye, but then all of a sudden it'll just pop away. It's not my eyelash at all, it's a floater that's heading that way, you know. It's one of those type of deals. Yeah, so we all get them.
It's been like 2 years since I've had my last exam, vision. So maybe I should.
Well, if you can read and if you can read your book without any problem, then there's really no reason.
Well, sometimes I get a little blurred, but I mean, I can read.
You're right. Okay, and without glasses.
Uh,
As we get older, of course, we become more and more farsighted. So that's what is going on. So our arm has to get longer and longer and longer so we can actually read things. Okay, so what are we doing? Okay, so we're able to make the picture. Remember, everything that we see is a mosaic. We're just like and of course people make fun of flies' eyes because flies have a lot of different surfaces. Ours is a round surface. Theirs is like a bunch of octagons. They've got 100 octagons, and that's what they see. It's one of the reasons why they can see you about to hit them, because they see all over in a round picture. It's almost 360 degrees.
Wow.
I know, doesn't seem fair. You can imagine what their world looks like though. There are various ways that the eye adjusts to different light intensities. The pupil of the eye will shrink with bright light and widen with dim light. Rods and cones have different thresholds. This is known as range fractionation. So your rods are more acute for seeing in the dark, and of course your cones are your daylight vision primarily, because they are detecting color, whereas rods are just detecting light. Photoreceptors will adjust their range of reaction depending on the intensity of the light. This will give the individual visual acuity despite the quality of the illumination. So we adjust, we adapt to whatever light that we see. This is a very bright light in here, but if we wandered outside, if we closed our eyes and went outside, it would seem yellow. The whole outside would seem yellow. The reality is that the sunlight that we get is white light, but as we go toward the equinox, and we've already passed the equinox, the light gets yellower and yellower and yellower. So if we were outside around Christmas time, and it was a sunny day, the reality is the light would be yellow instead of white, because the sun is at a lower place in on the horizon. So it would be relatively yellow. And of course, the farther north you go, the more you can see this. When I lived in Montana, of course, we had like 6 hours of daylight right around Christmas, because it's so far north. And I mean, if you go up into Alaska, you've got 2 and 4 hours of daylight, and sometimes they have none. Not very much anyway. But their light is always a different color. It goes from yellow to orange to red, depending on where the sun is on the horizon. But the reality is we only have white light in the summertime. The sun is only white in the summertime. If you're thinking about it and you go outside and you look at what it looks like outside, it's fairly yellow. The light is relatively yellow. But in here, of course, it's always white light. But it doesn't really matter whether it's yellow or whether it's white. Our brains are still adapting to the light that we have. So we're seeing everything as bright, despite the fact that it's yellower light. If it was changing from white to yellow instantaneously, then we would be able to detect the yellow light. I mean, in the evening, of course, 4 or 5 o'clock in the evening, you're driving around, you're not even thinking, yeah, the sun's still up, and the sun's shining on something, therefore that is the color that I'm seeing. And the reality is your brain is just adapting to the quality of the light, of the yellow light, or the orange light. I mean, we can still tell what color somebody's shirt is at 6 or 7 o'clock at night. But of course, the sun's going down a little bit earlier now than it was before. Yeah. Calcium is a major player in photoreceptor light adaptation. When an individual changes from one extreme light to another, it takes time to adapt to the new intensity of light. This is because the retinol and the opsin break down at higher rates in bright light and must regenerate to be available in the dark. And for this reason, a lot of people don't go into the dark. They have street lights. I mean, we rarely go out into the dark because there's so much light out there. Security lights. People have security lights. Drives me nuts. When I was living in Montana, of course, we were in a fairly isolated area, and there was hardly any light. But all the farmers, of course, had a security light. We had a security light at our place. I couldn't wait until the damn thing burned out. Because it was too bright. I mean, not only that, but light creates shadow. You can see better in the dark than you can with shadow. Shadow makes things darker, so you can't see things in the shadow. Okay. So if you're in the dark, you can actually see who's out there better than if you've got a light and you're shining it. Wherever your light is shining, you can see that cone of light, but you can't, everything else is darker, is blacker, so it's a lot more difficult to see. So if you have somebody that's smart enough to understand shadows, then you're not going to be able to see them. And that's one of the reasons why my brother was so successful. That's why he was able to come back from Vietnam. That's because he understood shadows. He's a pretty smart kid, but he also, and this is just a natural thing for him. When we played in the dark when we were kids, he won. He always won, because he would get in a shadow and nobody could see him, or he would climb a tree and everybody's looking for him on the ground and nobody could find him. You know, playing hide and seek or kick the can or pee-wee stick down or whatever. Anyway, he'd always win. He'd win. Some nights he would, we'd start playing, and he wouldn't come in for hours. He just wouldn't come in. He was always out there, and usually he was right fairly close to the house, but nobody could find him because he understood shadows. So in order to find him, you had, and there were lights, so the lights were creating all the shadows, and he was smart. I don't know. Anyway, it saved his life over in Vietnam, so I guess we should all be happy. Okay, so what's happening here? So it takes a while to adapt to darkness, to be able to see at night. It takes 5, 6, 7 minutes to adapt. Most people don't want to spend, they don't know what's out there. It scares them, so they don't go out in the dark. They never go out in the dark. Adaptation is much quicker when adjusting from dark to light, because the retinal opsin level is not depleted. So it's a lot easier going from the dark into the light than it is to go from the light into the dark. And this is one of the reasons why people turn on all the lights in their houses or whatever. I don't like light. I'm better off with darkness. I can see better.
How about people that, well, now it's Halloween, but like adjusting to like strobe light?
Where all of a sudden they're not strobing anymore?
It's like blinking fast and fast.
Yeah, I'm going to show you that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, this gets real interesting. Exactly. The reality is that this is strobing right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Okay. Your computer screen is strobes. But we can't pick it out because we have adjusted and our brains are telling us it's a continuous picture. Yeah. But the reality is it's a flashing light, which could drive you crazy, I guess. Yeah, it's just our brains adapting in essence. Color acuity is more accurate in the center of the visual field because the fovea is almost exclusively cones, as you can see from this graphic. Moving out from the fovea, the number of cones decreases and the number of rods increases. When I was in the military, of course, we didn't have night vision goggles. There were night vision goggles. They did exist. They were very large and they were very bulky. There were only select individuals that were allowed to use them. So what they trained us to do was to not look directly at something. If we were trying to find light, then about 20 degrees off center was where you would find it. So if I'm trying to find a light out there, I wouldn't look directly at it. I'd look about 20 degrees off to find it. If I looked directly at it, of course, it would disappear. So that's what they trained us to.
I think they taught us that in Ranger School during Derby phase.
Oh, there you go. Oh, when
Fourth
they-
weekend, it's 61 days,
Yeah.
non-stop. So I think it was like the fourth weekend, we did Derby Mountainous, and I think they taught something like that to us.
Some people have a difficult time with their eyesight if they don't get proper sleep. This kind of disqualifies somebody from ranger school from being a ranger or from being a SEAL, because those guys go out and they'll stay awake for 48, well, you know this.
You don't get much sleep.
Yeah, you don't get very much
And you
sleep.
think once you get to your unit, it'll be better, and it does get like, maybe like 20% better,
Yeah.
but.
Not
So-
Yeah, they don't seem to care about whether you've got any sleep or not. So military people are really good at taking cat naps. 20 minutes, yeah, so if they get a break of any kind at all, they just
Sleep anywhere.
they go to sleep and they can sleep anywhere. It is amazing. We had a cop who had been in Vietnam, and I don't think he slept his whole tour over there. But this guy could fall asleep standing up. He was amazing. He was on our softball team, and he would fall asleep not in the batter's box, but when he was warming up to bat, he'd fall asleep standing up against the fence. I mean, it was just the most amazing thing, and we'd have to go over and wake him up in order to get him to go and bat. Well, a lot of times he was pissed because we woke him up from a deep sleep. And he was kind of grouchy, but he was a good hitter. About half the visual cortex, the V1, is devoted to the fovea. This is one of the reasons that humans are able to concentrate their spatial field on tasks close at hand, such as reading and surgery. We're pretty good at it. We're not nearly as good as cats are. Cats can self-hypnotize, and they will stand completely still, waiting for a mouse to move, and since they're not moving at all, the mouse doesn't see them as alive. So the mouse will move, and then the cat will catch it, of course. But a cat has that ability. Humans don't really have that ability. Well, snipers kind of do, but not really. They have to move around. But a cat can sit there with its eyes open looking at something for 10, 15 minutes without moving a muscle, as amazing as that is. Scotoma is a gap in the perceptual field, usually due to an injury of the visual mapping area of the brain. This is a TBI problem. People with scotoma, and it's supposed to have an O in it, it won't let me adjust this, so I misspelled a word. The people with scotoma will often compensate for their problem by allowing part of their brain not affected to dominate the affected area, and of course, they rarely see this. If they look directly at something and they weren't sure what they were going to see, they will see this, and then it will quickly fill in like this. That's what will happen. So the brain is filling in the empty places. Now the weird part is that this is known as blind sight, and we all have blind sight. This is really weird because we have a blind spot in the center of our visual field, where the optic nerve feeds into the back of the eyeball. So we all have a blind spot, but we all fill it in. The only time you can see a blind spot is when you're forced to see a blind spot, and that's what I'm going to do right now. Are you ready? Okay. This is blind spot, blind sight, and this visual you'll see movement, and there's also a gray spot. If you concentrate on the red spot, pretty soon all those other things will start moving, and this gray spot will go away. And the reason the gray spot goes away is because your brain is filling it in. It's filling it in with this stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. It's weird. I was looking at this before I came to class. I almost blinded myself. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Anyway, so that's what blind sight is. So the reality is we may have holes in our vision and we don't know it, but our brains are just filling in those spots. stop blinding you now. Each eye is divided into two parts, the nerves of the temporal half of the visual field and nerves of the nasal half of the visual field. So we can divide our eyeball in half, and this portion of our eye sees one thing, and this portion of our eye sees something else. And it starts, and all these things start to cross. It gets really, really weird. So the outside of your visual field, the outside of this eyeball sees over here, and the inside of this eyeball sees out here. So we get this crossing, and this is one of the reasons why we can see 180 degrees, because different parts of our eye are seeing across our eyeball. So we don't have to concentrate on one thing. We're seeing all this at the same time. We're seeing our peripheral field as a constant thing. So what we're actually seeing is movement. Out here, of course, it's all rods. It's all rods. So all we can detect is movement. We can't really detect color. So if a green car drove past to my right, I wouldn't be able to tell that it was green. I would just see it as dark. But if it zoomed past and I tried to look at it and it was gone, I wouldn't be able to detect its color. As the optic nerve leaves each eye, the nerves come together in an area known as the optic chiasm, and this is where the optic chiasm is. The optic chiasm, the nasal optic nerves cross at the optic chiasm. The optic nerves cross to the opposite hemisphere, and the temporal optic nerves stay on the same side. Okay. So the outside of this eye and the outside of this eye, they stay on. It stays on the right and the left. So the outside of your left eye stays in the left hemisphere, and the outside of your right eye stays on the right hemisphere. But the inside, the nasal nerves actually cross.
So right is left and left is right?
Yeah.
Okay.
On the inside.
On the inside.
Now remember, we have 208 million pixels to interpret. So when we start putting these together in the back of our brains as a picture, well, for one thing, it flips it over.
Yeah.
It flips the field over, but we're actually, it gets real strange and real complicated at this point, because now we need to and this is one of the ways we can tell if somebody has brain damage, because they will have a difficult time seeing things. The outside of this eye is seeing over here, and it's being interpreted by the right side of the brain, and the outside of this eye is staying on this side of the brain, and when it puts the picture together, it doesn't put the picture together correctly. This is one of the reasons why if somebody has had has had a concussion, playing football or whatever, we ask them how many fingers we're holding up. Because if we're holding 2 fingers up and they're seeing 4 fingers, it means that all of these things are getting screwed up.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, it's so much fun. After the optic chiasm, the nerve pathways are known as the optic tracts. Most axons of the optic tract terminate in the lateral geniculate nucleus of the thalamus. So the thalamus does have an important role to play. It distributes out the information from the eyeball. It's the one that takes in the upside down picture and the inside of the eye picture, which goes over to the wrong side of your body, and it sends it back to the V1, and it actually is able to make that picture a whole picture. The thalamus doesn't actually do that, but it is directing that information to your V1 in a correct pattern. So if you've been hit, and of course, if you've ever, Scott and I have been in an explosion. So
I was getting nerve block shots in that area.
Back here?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Had every Thursday right here, and in each shoulder for about 4 months.
Okay. Are you still getting the shots?
No.
Okay. And you're not having any problems? Were you having vision problems before?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was seeing being in formation, and like the first sergeant, it's like there was 2 of them. I was like, fuck, just paying attention.
Damn. He's bad enough when there was just
Well,
one of him, and now
I
there's
had
two.
that, and they sent the alpha stem machine to my house.
Oh, really?
This is, yeah, the electromagnetic,
Right.
yeah, they sent one of those to my house.
Isn't that weird? But you're okay now.
I don't know, freaking being so damn far, man.
The brain wants to correct itself, and that's exactly what's happened with you. It's healed.
Mm.
It was damaged before, and it needed to reconfigure, to figure out how to see properly again. And that's exactly what's happened. The nerve blocks, and that's what the nerve blocks were for. The nerve blocks were...
I knew it was no freaking joke, man.
Well, you
Each time she
probably-
goes, oh, are you ready? I'm like, oh, shit. It was like at least this big, man.
Sure.
And you see the stuff, it was like, alright. And then, cause I shaved my head, so it would bleed right
Sure.
away. But I'd have to have someone come pick me up, cause there's no way I can freaking drive.
Oh, no, of course
So they're all like, hey, you got quarters, you got, so it was cool for like 3 months. I was at a 3-day weekend, but the next day I had to stay in bed because it hurt so freaking
Of course,
much.
well, no kidding. Did you feel nauseous? Did you feel like you were about to throw up? Was that the...
No, it just hurt.
It just hurt, okay.
Then it would go from here to right here.
Huh.
I got 50% just from migraines.
Well, I would think so.
I get migraines pretty bad to where,
Are you still having migraines?
not as often, but I still get them.
He's healing. This is fascinating.
Because when Corey knows, I'm like, I'm fucking laying down, man. She goes, okay. She goes, hey, daddy's sleeping, whatever.
Yeah.
I have to put the pillow on my face.
Sure.
I'm done.
See, you put the pillow on your face not only to darken things, but so that your eyes won't see anymore. And that's your basic problem. Your problem is back here in your optic nerve, or in your optic cortex, in your visual cortex, in your V1. That's where the problem is.
How many V's are there?
There's 5.
5?
Yeah. It's so fascinating. As you can see, this is an individual that has their eyes closed. They open their eyes and the visual field starts firing. And as a more important vision comes into their focus, you can see how active the V1 through the V5 area is, the optic, or the visual cortex. That's the visual cortex. The primary visual cortex is sometimes called the striate cortex because of the striations that run through the area, visual areas, and I'm going to show you a picture of it in a second. Visual areas of the brain not in the striate cortex are known as extrastriate cortex. So as we saw with this MRI, as we saw it's fairly extensive. But if we just look at the visual cortex, well, we saw it before, didn't we? Yeah, whoops. There we go, okay. Yeah, you can see it's not very big. It's not very large. But when we're talking about vision, it takes in this whole area. This is the striate cortex, and the rest of it is the extrastriate cortex.
Okay.
It still has to do with interpretations of vision. This is where the picture is actually created back here. That's why we saw, whoops, I'm sorry. That's why we saw this. You can see it's much darker back here than it is. This is interpreting the picture, and this is creating the picture.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Visual areas of the brain not in the striate are called the extrastriate. Some of the axons of the optic tract send their axons to the superiorcolliculus, where the superiorcolliculus helps the eyes track rapid movements. Some people can do this and some people can't. Hunters, people that are hunters, they detect movement very readily. So they see it out of their peripheral vision. So the superiorcolliculus, depending on who your people were, you can either track rapid eye movements or track rapid movements, or you can't. People that play baseball, of course, the ball's coming in 100 miles an hour, 105 miles an hour, whatever, and they're able to react to that. You know, select individuals are able to do that. Other individuals, they can't. I used to pitch slow pitch, which is the dumbest thing in the world to do, because it's like you're
waiting for the ball.
You're waiting for the ball to come back and hit you in the face. Exactly.
Well, I guess I think of boxers too.
Yeah, boxers, exactly. The faster your hands are, the better a boxer you are. But of course, there are some individuals like Sugar Ray Leonard was good at this. Muhammad Ali, they could catch the movements of somebody else. It's one of the reasons why Sonny Liston was a big puncher, but he was kind of slow. He was slow.
But he hit you.
Oh yeah. Oh my goodness.
Haymaker.
Yeah. Oh yeah. But he didn't lay a glove on Muhammad Ali, and Muhammad Ali fought him 3 times, I think, twice.
Duran was good too. Duran?
Yeah.
He was real good too.
Yeah. So we have these people that are fast, that have fast reflexes. They can track rapid movements very, very readily. Baseball players, not so much basketball players. Receivers and football receivers who can pick the ball out of the air. Tennis players, yeah. So yeah, we have select individuals that can do this. Other individuals, not so much. You can be a good tennis player and play a slow game, but if you can pick off the other guy's 100-mile-per-hour serve, of course, then you can return it. It really all depends. It depends on on your abilities. The LGN is arranged in 6 layers. The outer 4 are the parvocellular layers, and the inner 2 are the magnocellular layers. Magno meaning large and parvo meaning around, actually. P cells have small receptive fields, while the M cells have large receptive fields. So the M cells are to take in your entire visual field. And it takes in everything. But if I were concentrating and I were trying to do my cell phone with my thumbs, you know, I would need the P cells. But if I'm looking at the entire picture, I'm looking at a vista, of course, I'm using my M cells. M cells are sensitive to low contrast and rapid change. That's one of the reasons why you can pick out movement in your peripheral vision. Some people can, some people can't. About 10% of the retinal ganglion cells are M cells. 80% of the retinal ganglion cells are P cells. This is one of the reasons why we are good at focusing on things, why we're able to do that. P cells require high contrast to be stimulated. P cells are relatively insensitive to rapid temporal change, such as flicker. P cells are sensitive to the different wavelengths of the light, and they therefore detect color. P cells have sustained responses, and they have high acuity. This is the reason why you can look at this screen without getting sick, is because you have 80% of your cells are P cells. So you're not detecting the flicker in the screen. If we took, and this is really kind of interesting, especially with the old computer screens, if you watch a movie about, and it shows a computer screen in the background, you can see it flipping.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, because when they make a tape, they take individual pictures. And because of that, our brains are able to fill in that information, but the tape can't. It's just individual pictures. So it's showing picture, 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 and you can actually see the flipping in the background. It drives you crazy. Drives me crazy because I know what it is. Yeah, I know. So if you see a film of a computer screen, you see it flipping.
And that goes the same for like movies, like back in the day when it was. Okay.
Exactly.
But now it's completely different. You can't really pick
I
out.
I don't know. They don't usually show computer screens anymore because they can't keep them from flipping.
Uh-huh.
Okay. It's just the way it works, I guess. The primary visual cortex, the V1, is the first and most abundant area in the human brain. And as you can see, the V1 is this fairly intensive area right back in the back of your brain. And this is one of the reasons why if you get hit in the head, especially if you get hit in the front, your brain is in a pool of water and it bounces. It will rebound, and that's what will happen. You get hit in the forehead, and of course it affects your visual field because you get a rebound effect. So if I get hit on top of the head here, it rebounds to the visual field. So potentially I'm not going to be able to see very well, which is potentially what happened. Where was the explosion in front of you, or was it to the
whole
side?
view flipped over.
Oh wow! So you not only
I actually hit this side and the top.
Yeah. Okay.
And I guess the back, like all over here.
Right. Yeah, it was probably when you hit the top of your head that it affected your vision.
I just remember firing
you're
two
unconscious.
shots, and I wake up, I'm in freaking launch stool. I pulled out the IV because I was pissed, no one told me what was going on, and as soon as I pulled it out, I tried to walk, fell out.
Oh, right over, couldn't do it. Yeah, launch stool is cold and it's green and it's wet. And you went from Iraq? Was
Yeah.
it, you were in Iraq? Yeah. You went from dry.
Well, it's when I got up to walking around and look, it's really pretty up there.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
real nice.
Oh, yeah.
But it's a big difference from going to the desert to the mountains.
Yeah.
Big difference.
Yeah.
Definitely colder.
Pine trees, it's all pine trees. It's gorgeous up there. Yeah, I was stationed there for 3, not at Launchville, but at Ramstein. Ramstein's here and Launchville's up the hill. It's right there. That's where the hospital is.
Oh, okay.
It's still an ugly hospital, I'm sorry, that's a World War II hospital. It's a World War II German hospital that we took over, and we just kept building onto it.
Air Force runs it. I
Now,
think it's Air Force.
now they do. And back when I was there, it was the Army that ran it, and we had the Air Force hospital at Wiesbaden. Now the Army has the Wiesbaden hospital.
It's just switched.
Yeah, we switched, even though the Wiesbaden hospital is much, much nicer than the Landstuhl hospital. That's how stupid we are. From the V1, the stimulus is farmed out to other areas of the brain, depending on what part of the eye the stimulus comes from. Areas are designated as V1 to V5. And these are our visual portions of our brain, the V1 through the V5. Researchers have discovered that there are 3 different kinds of cones. The cones that are sensitive to short wavelengths only, cones that are sensitive to long wavelengths only, and cones that are sensitive to middle wavelengths. This is how we can detect color. Of the middle wavelength cones, some are more sensitive to the higher ranges of middle. Okay. Some of the middle range cones are more sensitive to the lower range of middle. So some detect yellow better than green, and others, green. There are twice as many long wavelength cones, the ones that read reds, as middle wavelength cones, greens and yellows. Short wavelength cones are the fewest, the purples and the blues. So what is so many people's favorite color? It's red, and that's the most numerous cones that we have in our eyes. This gets a little strange because some people see red really well, but they don't see blue or purple very well at all because they don't have that many cones in their eyes.
I have to, if I got a shirt, I have to ask Corey, is it blue or black? Dark blue and black?
Oh, okay.
It's black. So, I don't know, man. My sister's blind.
And it's males that are the worst at detecting colors. As strange as, no, it's not that strange. It's on the X chromosome. So if it's a female, she's got 2 X chromosomes, so one X can cancel out the other X. Very rare for a woman to be colorblind, but it's very common. Almost all men have some color deficiency, and it's because of our Y chromosomes. Our Y chromosomes don't see color. It's on the X chromosome, strangely enough. Some people are colorblind with just reds and greens. Some people are colorblind with blues and purples. If somebody doesn't like blues and purples, it's usually because they have fewer of the short wavelength cones. They just don't see it the same. It's almost gray to them. It gets a little weird. Once upon a time, we didn't have color film. We only had black and white film. So all of our movies were in black and white. And people were perfectly happy just watching black and white movies because they thought that they could detect what the color was from the shade of gray it was. Oh, I know. My wife will not watch a black and white movie.
I like black and white.
I do too, but
Yeah.
she will not watch them because there's no color to it. And she can't tell. She thinks everybody's wearing gray. But I was watching a black and white movie last night. Myopia is a condition where the eyeball is elongated, causing the image to focus in front of the retina, causing a blurred image, and this is, of course, what the blurred image looks like. There is some evidence that nearsightedness is caused when children look at images too close to their faces, and this was the complaint when we first started, well, back in the 50s and 60s. The kids were getting too close to the television set. And because of that, they were making themselves nearsighted, or at least that was the idea, that they were making themselves nearsighted. My mother made us all the chairs were back from the television, even though the television was only this big. They were way back so that we wouldn't blind ourselves. As it turned out, I've got 5 brothers and sisters, and everybody wore glasses except me. I was the only one that didn't wear glasses. So when we take a family photograph, when we took a family photograph, everybody would have on glasses except me. And I'd make fun of everybody else because I'm mean. I'm just a mean brother. This can be prevented, myopia can be prevented by only allowing reading in adequate light, avoiding small type, reading without glasses anytime that you can do so. So that's the way it works. Oh, she's going blind.
Oh no.
Okay. Wait a minute, her vision will come back in a minute. Maybe? No? Oh,
Yeah.
I was worried there for a second.
Thought it was just me.
Yeah, no. It's coming and going. As weird as that is. Okay, so we're done with talking about your eyesight.
No more eyes.
No more eyes. Let's start talking about muscles. Movement. I'll try not to do push-ups for you. So we're talking about movement, motor control, and plasticity. Muscles cover the skeletal system and provide movement. They also provide protection for the organs that lie underneath, so they're very important. How muscles attach to the bone is an indication of the type of movement that they perform. Muscles only provide force when they contract, so the only time that you're using your muscles is if your muscles are larger, are the largest they could possibly be. So if we're talking about a bicep, you have to move your arm in. That is the bicep. That's the movement that the bicep creates. So as you move your arm in, it gets smaller. So that's the only way that it creates force by getting smaller. But of course, we have muscles that bring our arm in. We also have muscles, our triceps, move our arm out. So the tricep is getting smaller as I'm straightening my arm, and my bicep is getting smaller as I move my arm in. Like I said, I'll try not to do push-ups for you. Some muscles maintain body posture, some muscles produce movement around a joint. Any movement that occurs in the body is performed by muscles, and this is happening constantly. As I'm stumbling around up here and moving my hands and my arms, I'm moving my muscles. Everything has to be muscle, controlled by muscles. Muscles are connected to bone by tendons. Around a joint there are two sets of muscle groups. When one group contracts, the other extends, like with the arm. The bicep moves my arm in, my triceps move my arm out. These muscles are known as antagonists. The easiest one to see is your biceps and your triceps. So if I were trying to make my arm stronger, I could lift weights, and if I'm moving my arm up, I'm lifting weights with my bicep. As I move the weight down, I'm using my tricep. My son's a bodybuilder, which is kind of fun. And of course, I try to compete with him from time to time, which is stupid, because he's 20 years younger than I am. But the only muscle that I have that is larger than his are my triceps. I know, it's weird. Why would anybody build up their triceps? It doesn't make any sense. It straightens your arm out. Why is that important? You know, this is important. If you're lifting something, you lift it this way.
Yeah.
Not push it down. But I work on my triceps. It's kind of weird. Muscle groups that act together to perform the same act are known as synergists. Muscles are made of thousands of fibers. These muscle fibers are made up of two kinds of filaments, thick and thin filaments arranged in a regular pattern. Thick filaments are made up of myosin, and the thin filaments are made up of actin, myosin and actin. If you are a meat eater, and you eat chicken, you can see if you eat a chicken breast, before you cook it, you can see all the striation in the chicken breast. And you can see the myosin and the actin in there, if you know what you're looking at. There are two basic types of muscles in the human body. There are smooth muscles, which that's in your gut. It's in your heart. Your heart is all smooth muscle. Smooth muscle contracts automatically. It's regulated by your autonomic nervous system. Your heart muscle, the muscles of your digestive tract are smooth muscles. The other type of muscles are striated muscles, primarily supporting your skeletal system. They look very, very much different. As you can see, this is smooth muscle, and this is striated muscle that support the skeletal system. Almost all the muscles in our body look like this.
So in between the two, the striate muscles, is that the one that's more, how can you say it, like you can
build it up?
That, but I'm talking about like you can straighten it more than the smooth muscles?
Yeah, the smooth muscle just does one thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, I'm trying to think in my head.
The smooth muscle, can you strengthen your heart muscle? Yes, but it's not going to get bigger. You don't want it to get bigger. If you strengthen this muscle, it'll get larger.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
But if you strengthen this muscle, it will just get stronger. It doesn't change shape. This muscle does change shape. You can build this muscle. This muscle, the best you can do is small, and it stays the same size. You wouldn't want your gut to get bigger.
So like the smooth muscles, it's kind of like a protective layer, I guess you could say?
No, it has a function. I mean, the heart muscle, of course, beats.
Okay.
Is a constant beating process. This muscle surrounds the digestive tract and it squeezes.
Mm-hmm.
If you are sedentary, this muscle will get weak, and you'll get your heart muscle will expand because it's getting weaker. It's some of the muscle is filling in with fat, and you don't want that.
No.
Okay, no.
Okay. I get it. I just had it backwards in my head for some reason. I don't.
Right. So when we're talking about sedentary, this muscle, if you stop using it, it will be replaced with fat. Same thing with this muscle.
Okay.
If you stop using it. So this is one of the reasons why exercise is so important. Yeah, it keeps all of your muscles healthy, and that's what you want. You want them to be healthy, you don't want to replace them with fat. We take in so much fatty foods and so much sugar that convert to fat that a lot of times if we're too sedentary, we will have a weight problem, and we'll have a muscle problem. Now, having a muscle problem, as far as my bicep is concerned, that's no big deal, but having a muscle problem if it's my heart, this is huge. Or your gut.
I'm obese according to the BMI chart.
Yeah, but look how active you were before. So I wouldn't, most of your mass has to do
No, I'm like 230 pounds. For my height, that's pretty damn heavy.
Yeah, but you were very healthy, 210 pounds or whatever you were when you were in the Rangers.
Oh, no, I was about 180.
180, really?
Yeah.
See, I'm
But I was just
185.
big. I was big. I had
Yeah.
to bench, me and some jar heads had a thing. I
Never
put up
lift weights
260
with jar
3 times.
Never lift weights with your heads.
I'm like, what are you guys, over mechanics? Oh, over Rangers. Oh.
Exactly.
Yeah, my max, well, back then, I could put up 260 3 times, which is pretty good for a guy that's 180.
Oh, no kidding. My goodness, you're not
But
really
now,
supposed to
like,
lift.
I can bring it every day.
I wouldn't worry about your heart right now. You were healthy, you were a bodybuilder before, you were very active before, so your heart is probably still fairly healthy.
I know, when I went to the clinic, they worried about my cholesterol.
Okay, that has to do with your diet,
Your
right?
food
And
intake.
your
Well,
exercise.
I mean, considering where we live, it's hard to get healthy stuff.
I know, it's.
You see fascists, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, the meat's like fucking garble.
yeah, it's not very good. That's why I go to Gallup in order to.
Safeway's good though, Safeway's got good.
Yeah, I usually go
Sam's
to
Club?
Farmington or Flagstaff for food.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
I don't know with Farmington. It's over the mountain. I'm not gonna go there. Okay, so we got striated muscle, we got smooth muscle, and we need to keep them both healthy. Once upon a time, 2010, I had a heart attack. There was a reason for it, didn't have anything to do with blockage or anything. It had to do with something else.
Stress.
Had to do with stress.
That's what happened to my mom. She has congestive heart failure.
Yeah. Oh, congestive heart failure. Congestive heart failure is usually caused by an accumulation of negative factors. Your heart becomes less efficient, and you build up fat around your heart. And that's
She's
usually,
only, like, she's real skinny and she's only 55.
she's real skinny.
Right?
Okay.
I mean, not like freaking like,
But she had congestive heart failure.
eh.
Did her ankles swell up and she built up fluid in her?
I don't know, I was in the stand when this happened, so,
Yeah.
but it was about
Yeah.
6 years ago, 7 years ago.
Right. Congestive heart failure has to do with the fact that your heart is beating so inefficiently that it can't clear the liquid from your body. Now, we're constantly breathing in liquid, and our lungs, our heart has to beat properly, we have to breathe enough so that we expel enough of that fluid, so we don't build up the fluid in our bodies. If our heart is not beating efficiently, then that fluid from our lungs will accumulate. And we get swollen ankles, our feet swell up, our legs will swell up. This is a bad sign. If you've got edema in your extremities, now we got a really serious problem, because that means your heart's not beating efficiently to get rid of all that stuff. Now we can give you a medication that'll take care of that. Lasix is
LASIK surgery.
No, isn't it Lasix? Yeah, it's Lasix. It's a medication, it's a diuretic.
Yeah.
Yeah, not LASIK surgery. Lasix. And it takes away the fluid, but I mean, you can't do that for an extended length of time. You can't live off of Lasix for an extended length of time. What they have to do is do something to repair your heart, to make it beat more efficiently.
Does that usually tend to happen to people that are like underweight or overweight?
Usually it's people that are overweight.
Because I've seen people that their lower bodies are bigger than their upper bodies. Is that what?
They're just pair people.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, some people just have big
I don't know,
bodies.
I see people look like pet boys, you know, the big ass heads, and their bodies that look like small.
And really small bodies?
Yeah.
Okay. The pet boys.
It is just genetics. I don't know.
Yeah, it could be genetic.
And I'm trying to think, but yeah, it's like that show, My 600-Pound Life. The people, their lower bodies are bigger than their upper bodies, and so like I was trying to think what their
It's
bodies.
their sedentary lifestyle, that and the fact that they're pear-shaped. They're normally pear-shaped.
Yeah.
People, and these individuals really need to control their weight. Otherwise, they're going to kill themselves.
Yeah, they can't walk or anything
Yeah,
whatsoever.
That's stupid. Well, I'm sorry.
No, I know.
That's on the film. That's on the film. I just said it was stupid. Yeah, they need to be more, it's almost suicidal, if you think about it.
Yeah.
But then again, drinking is suicidal, smoking is suicidal to some extent. Taking drugs is suicidal.
Yeah.
Everything could kill you, man, even breathing. That's in Japan, they have a mask. They don't want to breathe the stuff from the factories and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah,
I
exactly.
mean, you're gonna go out anyway, so I mean, just enjoy life.
Yes, well, you need to move around. Well, and this is the other problem. You know, I was talking about the smooth muscles before, if I can make it go the right direction. Yeah, I was talking about the smooth muscles before. The reality is your heart's really important. Of course, it keeps you alive.
Yeah.
But you also have to digest food. If you're sedentary, like your 600-pound friend, isn't that what it's called? My 600-pound life.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're so sedentary that they're not moving the food through their bodies efficiently. Potentially they're eating a lot. Well, how could they maintain 600 pounds? But this is really important. You can really mess yourself up if you're not digesting your food properly. And that's the job of the smooth muscles in your digestive tract. So how do you do that? Well, you eat the right foods. You eat roughage and whatnot to clear out all the extraneous substances in your body, but you also exercise. You know, movement will move that stuff through your body, and if you don't move all that waste product in your body, it'll accumulate. Smooth muscles become less efficient, and now we got all kinds of interesting problems. We got a lot more problems. So they tell medicine, we got to fix this, but I'm not going to change my lifestyle. You might as well just flush them down the toilet. I'm sorry, that was cruel. Yes, sir, you were going to say.
So you just walk, 'cause I can't run.
Yeah.
I mean, I got shin splints, plus I got the pain in my knee, you know? But walking is something, right?
Yeah, well, you got here from the dorm.
No, I mean, me and wife used to walk the whole trail.
That's all you need to do. You just need to move. You need to not be sedentary, not sit on your dead butt, and because your butt will get dead, by the way.
Yeah, I fall asleep, bro.
Yeah.
It does, literally, you'll fall asleep.
But you just need to move. I mean, you need
Yeah.
not to be sedentary. And of course, nobody in this room has that problem. But there are people that do have that problem, that will not move. They think they don't have to, or I don't know why they're not moving, but they don't. And of course, this muscle becomes inefficient. And the heart muscle becomes inefficient. And you cannot live with poor or smooth muscle.
Yeah.
Some people have a congenital problem with their smooth muscles. They're inefficient, and they die. They just die. There's not a whole lot we can do about it, because, well, there's nothing you can do about it. That's the problem.
Yeah.
So you can't give them medication to make it work. Since different muscles perform different tasks, each require different speeds, precision, strength, and endurance. Striated muscle fibers come in two forms: fast muscle fibers and slow muscle fibers. Eye movement must be quick to follow the movement of speeding objects, but only for short periods of time. Now the question is, did she wear black? Remember, she said she was not going to wear black today.
It's not camera.
It's camo? Okay.
No, I thought camera.
Extraocular muscles are fast muscle fibers, as curious as that is. So all of our muscles are doing different things. Okay, and they need to be to work at different speeds. If you're not wearing black today, I won't recognize you. I'll think you're somebody else.
Do I oversee me?
Fast muscle fibers react promptly and strongly. They fatigue rapidly. They are used when muscle tension must change frequently. So if you've ever tried to hold something that was extremely heavy with your arms fatigue fairly quickly, unfortunately. Oh God, I'll never recognize you.
I won this before.
I know you have. Slow muscle fibers have greater resistance to fatigue, are used mainly to maintain posture. This is what bodybuilders will do. Bodybuilders will work on their fast muscle fibers and their slow muscle fibers. One of the reasons my son is a bodybuilder is because when he lifts really, really slow. And he doesn't lift a whole lot of weight, the 265 pounds. And he never maxes out, of course, that you tear muscles when you do that. But he lifts really slow. And that's one of the reasons why he has such large muscles. Irritating.
Yeah, it's not the weight, it's the reps.
Yeah, exactly. It's the reps. Exactly. And it's the speed that you lift with, that you lift. Muscles react to stimulus coming in from motor neurons. The axon will split into many branches and activate many muscle fibers. As the axon is activated, it releases the neurotransmitter acetylcholine. So here we have acetylcholine. Once again, acetylcholine works on your memory, it works on your eyesight, it works on your muscle movement. So there you go. But one nerve will activate a lot of different muscle fibers. So there you go. Not a bad deal. Why don't you stop right here? Yeah, let's go ahead and stop right here. She didn't wear black today.
Sorry.